2 summers ago, I downloaded the dating app Hinge. I'd heard from friends that it was one of the better platforms for LGBT folks to find dates, so being a lesbian, I decided to give it a go. I found it to be just as good as my friends had mentioned, as the little prompts really give you an idea of what people are like before you actually connect with them. I hate to sound like this horror story is sponsored by Hinge and Raid Shadow Legends or something, but it really was refreshing to find a dating app that seemed to focus much more on personality than just a person's looks. Anyway, I'm just flicking through profiles, sending out the odd message here and there when I come across the profile of a girl called Amy. Amy was hotter than hot. She was literally my type too. Crop dyed hair, sleeve tattoos, but a painfully adorable little face with these big, shining green eyes. On top of that, her job title said motorcycle mechanic, and there were legit photos of her working on old Harleys and whatnot, which, again, I thought was like the hottest thing ever. I double-tapped the picture of her working on the bike, typed in a message like, "This is so cool," and then just hoped and prayed that she'd be back in touch. It couldn't have been 20 minutes that passed before I got a little alert saying that Amy has invited you to start the conversation, or something like that. I'm thinking, no way. Is this a real profile? Sometimes a girl might take literally weeks to match with you, and here was Amy, hitting me up after less than an hour. I had my doubts, put it that way, but doubts that were quickly put to bed when she turned out to be charming, witty, and highly intelligent. We didn't always see eye to eye on certain issues, but the fact that she seemed reasonable and open to compromise was like the polar opposite of a red flag. It was like a blue flag or something. Something that screamed potentially wifey material over here. And as much as I tried not to hype the whole thing up, I was super excited to meet her to see if we had as much chemistry in person. So we arranged a meeting at a local coffee shop, nice and public for a first-time meeting. We're talking on Telegram by this point too, so she was able to send me a picture of the outfit she planned on wearing, just so I could recognize her. And oh my god, she looked gorgeous. I didn't think I could get any more nervous than I already was, but when I saw her in that flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled so her tats were showing, I swear I felt my blood pressure ramp up by 5 notches. Anyway, I take a few deep breaths, psych myself up to meet her, then head out of my apartment and around to the coffee place. Anyone who's been on a first date for the first time in a while will tell you how nerve-wracking it can be. Standing there, or sitting there, trying to look cool, while simultaneously being nervous as you're rubbernecking for any sign of your date. So, that's the kind of mood I'm in as I'm standing outside the coffee place, stewing in my own anxiety for 10 minutes, then 15, then 20. By the time I'd been waiting for a half hour, I was starting to get a little worried. Amy had mentioned that traffic was awful, so I figured she might be a few minutes late. But a whole half hour late? I was starting to think I was being stood up. I shoot Amy a text asking how far away she was. It takes a few minutes for her to see the message, but unlike her usual replies, which took a matter of minutes to type out, she doesn't send me anything. I figured that might be because she's driving, so I decide to give her a call just in case it's more convenient for her to talk that way. But again, there's no answer. I'm trying my best not to panic, telling myself like, it's fine, she's just busy, don't freak out. But I think deep down I knew it was all too good to be true. We'd matched too fast, she'd been too nice. I mean, she was objectively way out of my league, but it didn't make what came next any easier to deal with. I'm practically staring at our message thread on my phone, praying she'll either call or I get that little Amy is typing thing so I can at least know that she's still there. Then thank God. I see that little typing notification, and I feel this pure wave of relief wash over me, expecting her message to say something along the lines of, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry I'm late." But it didn't say that. It said something entirely different. And although I can't remember exactly what the message said, as I didn't exactly keep it around my inbox for long, it said something like this. Okay, I think this has gone on long enough, and I have to come clean. I'm not a lesbian. I'm not even a girl. Sorry to catfish you. I just thought you were hot and wanted to check you out in person. In person? What did they mean by in person? What followed was the most horrifying moment of revelation that I've ever experienced. Not only was Amy not real, or at least not the person I thought I was talking to, but the psycho creeper who got off on inconveniencing lesbians was actually there, somewhere not too far away, watching me. It made my skin crawl. I was angry, upset, confused, but the feeling that seemed to override all others was fear. The pure terror of being seen by someone or something that you can't see in turn. I start spinning around trying to find the creep staring at me, but no one seemed to be watching, or if they were certainly doing a great job of hiding it. Then, and I'm not even sure what compelled me to do this, but I started looking up. Now, the coffee place I was standing outside was surrounded by tall buildings, possibly the reason my instincts were screaming like, up, up, up. I must have looked like I was losing my mind out there, spinning like a top with this terrified look on my face, but suddenly, I saw him. Standing about 5 stories up in a large open window was the figure of a man. He was so high up that I couldn't quite make out his face, but he was definitely holding something in his hand, and I'd be willing to bet my left arm that it was a freaking cell phone. I'm guessing most of the units were apartments and they all had those large glass windows, but he was the only person I could see up there. It sure did look like he was staring down at me, but I didn't know for sure that he was staring at me. And then just when I figured I might just be imagining things and that there was no one actually watching me, just the sick troll that had tricked me into a fake date, he waved. The guy raised his hand and gives this slow, theatrical wave to make it perfectly clear that he was watching me. I swear to God I nearly puked right there and then. I was this horrible combination of nauseous and numb, and I've never felt like I was about to pass out in my entire life, but I feel like I came close right then. My head was just spinning with this this can't be happening. How could it be so dumb? No one that hot would ever like me. Of course it's a catfish. You're so stupid. Stupid, stupid, stupid. All I could do was just walk away with legs like jelly, wondering if I was going to scream or cry first. I've never felt so violated before, not without an actual crime being committed. I had zero recourse other than to report the catfish account, and no matter how upset I was, it wasn't like I could get the cops to arrest anyone over it. So yeah, I walked back to my apartment in a kind of daze, fell onto my mattress and just ugly cried into a pillow for like a half-hour straight. It was seriously one of the worst days of my entire life, and it put me off dating apps for almost 2 whole years. Even now, I have to apologize when talking to girls because I know I sound overly paranoid asking for video dates or whatever. I guess I'm lucky. And I can kind of blame COVID, but honestly, I don't care how paranoid or overly cautious I might seem. After what I went through, I can assure you, you can never be too careful when it comes to meeting internet strangers.
I met this friend online this summer before the junior year of high school. I was 16. His name was Josh. We clicked instantly. Our sense of humor matched up, and we very quickly became really good friends. He was a guy, and I a girl. I held no romantic feelings, more so I had a boyfriend. When I was 16, he was 19 and had romantic feelings towards me, and he let me know 6 months into our friendship. He loved me. We didn't have a stable friendship, as he would flip out a lot and would go on extended amounts of time without talking to me. He told me that he couldn't bear to talk to me, knowing that we couldn't be together because I was dating someone else. But I know it was more of a control thing. He wanted to make me feel like I was missing something out. He really hated women. Really, really disliked women and felt most were just users. He told me that I was different, that I was the only true woman he ever met. Real red flag right there. I was young and didn't think much of it. Our friendship was online, instant messaging and FaceTiming. Now, When we stopped talking for some time, he would go to Twitter and demonize me. But when he came back, I would ignore it, as he would come back funny and nice. He had a habit of lashing out at people and making them feel crappy. Another red flag, but I thought I was special and he would never do that to me. I was leading up to my 18th birthday and he said, "When you are 18, you are sending me nudes." I brushed it off as I wasn't going to, but I did notice the dominating tone. Fast forward 2 years, I was 18 and had started going to college and had broken up with my boyfriend in October. Josh took this opportunity to say that he couldn't wait to see me and that if I didn't meet him, he would be over. I had not many feelings for him, but I decided to give it a shot as I couldn't lose him. So I bought plane tickets to where he lived. My parents to this day have no idea about this. I was going on a Friday and would be returning on Monday. I started to feel that I was in love with him and was going to meet the guy I loved. A couple of weeks before going, I started getting cold feet and started hitting off with a guy from a neighboring university. I kissed the guy a day before my flight and decided I didn't have feelings for Josh. I thought that we had been friends for 2 years and he would understand. We could still have a good time as our friendship was worth more. I was naive. When going to the airport, I was certain I didn't love him. And when I reached there, I wanted to leave and never come back. I should have listened to my gut. I saw him outside the airport. He looked malicious and different. I had seen his pictures, but he looked different. He looked creepy here. I hugged him awkwardly, got in his car. We made awkward jokes and conversations. I wished I was in my dorm. We went to his apartment, up into his room, and smoked a few weeds. I fell asleep and woke up to him spooning me and groping me. That's when I unloaded and told him that I was not interested in him in any way romantically. He cried and begged to say that I loved him, and I said that I can't, so went into the bathroom and burned some things and came back normal and played games on his computer. The rest of the trip was just a combination of him being nice and kind to him being completely evil. Here are some of the things he did, or he said he did to me. He talked about me dying, making me sleep in his car, served me spaghetti with moldy sauce, farting on me when I was sleeping, telling my parents I was with him, calling me an idiot, telling me to shut up when I tried to speak, threatened to make me miss my flight and drop me in the middle of nowhere. He kept feeling me up in bed, and when I resisted, he said I wanted it too. When he said these things, I kept my cool and calm, but I was really scared and just wanted to get out of there. It is for 8 p.m., so at 11 a.m. he leaves, and at that time I pack and decide to go to the nearest shopping plaza and take an Uber from there. I ran and was at the end of the street feeling free when 2 arms wrapped around me from behind. He was hugging me. He mumbled something and ran back to his apartment. I ran to the shopping plaza and got an Uber, feeling finally free. I stayed at the airport for 8 hours with nothing to do, but it was better than staying at his place. When I got back, I blocked him from every social media, even LinkedIn. He still tried to contact me for the past 4 months, but luckily I didn't tell him my address. I hope I never meet him again.
You might be able to describe 17-year-old David Faraday as the all-American boy. David was clean-cut, a good student, and a member of the Boy Scouts of America. He was also apparently something of a moral arbiter, having once confronted a marijuana dealer outside of his high school when the man had apparently been attempting to peddle the drug to members of the student body. After threatening to inform the police, the dealer was said to never have hung around the high school again. And although by today's standards we might consider this to be so-called snitch behavior, David was clearly simply trying to protect his fellow students from something he was concerned would affect their academic performance. He was a good person, with a good heart, and almost all of what he did came from a place of love. But like many boys his age, David found himself increasingly interested in the opposite gender, and there was one particular young lady that caught his attention over all others. Betty Lou Jensen was 16, a year younger than David, but she was incredibly popular and her reputation as a charming, well-mannered young lady preceded her. She was also a very talented artist who took a great deal of interest in all things creative. It was at a local youth function that David got the chance to talk to Betty Lou, and his affection for her seemed to be entirely reciprocated. Betty Lou shared a great deal with him and even invited him to visit her after school so that he could walk her home. After a few weeks of wholesome teenage dating, something of a relationship began to blossom between the two bright-eyed young people. But all was not entirely well, as there was another boy who had his eye on Betty Lou, one who was not about to let David have her all to himself. He squared up to David when the young man was waiting outside of Betty Lou's high school, and although the confrontation didn't become physical, some pretty harsh insults were exchanged and David was warned to stay away from his new girlfriend. Other boys might have been deterred by such a display of possessiveness and aggression, but not David. He was determined to secure his place as the only boy in Betty Lou's life, and so one afternoon on their way home from school, David asked Betty if she'd like to go on a date with him, their first date, and to his absolute elation, Betty Lou said yes. David racked his brain for a solid first date idea, and given that it was late December, decided that a great way to capture that festive romantic spirit would be to take Betty Lou to a local Christmas event. And being the gentleman that he was, he made a promise to her parents to have her back home by 11 p.m. at the very latest. Rumor has it that David and Betty were planning on attending the Christmas-themed party with a few other local high school students, but perhaps this was simply a cover to reassure the young girl's parents, because what we know for certain is that they ended up driving over to Lake Herman Road in David's Rambler station wagon, parking it up in quite a well-known spot that was known to many as Lover's Lane. The whole appeal of the spot near Lake Herman is that it was quiet and unfrequented by members of the public, hence why young couples might use it to gain some privacy for certain unsavory activities. But it wasn't just infatuated lovebirds who noted the location's seclusion, because someone else wished to take advantage of the isolation for something that was considerably more malicious. At some point during their stay up on Lover's Lane, David and Betty Lou noticed another car pull into the spot, one that parked up alongside them before turning its lights off. At first, David and Betty were worried it was the cops, come to arrest them for committing lewd acts in public. But as they peered through the darkness to study the vehicle next to them, it became increasingly obvious that it was not in fact the police. All the young couple could do was watch, growing increasingly scared as the shadowy silhouette in the front seat stayed statue still, staring at them through the passenger's window. Betty Lou told David she was spooked and asked him to see if he could get the person to leave. But unlike previous encounters where David's bravery had shone through when confronted with a source of maliciousness, he too was far too frightened to do anything. But as he prepared to start up the Rambler's engine so he could drive Betty Lou out of there, the driver of the other vehicle got out and approached David's side of the Rambler. David was transfixed, frozen in fear like a deer in a car's headlights, but when he saw the mysterious stranger pull out a pistol and aim it at his window, his flight response kicked into gear. Betty threw open the passenger side door, throwing herself from the Rambler before David followed suit, but neither kid was fast enough to outrun a bullet. The stranger fired once through the roof of the Rambler, then sprinted around the back to fire another shot at David through the vehicle's rear window. Both shots hit the young man, and he crawled along the ground near the station wagon's back wheel on the passenger side, trying and failing to escape. Betty Lou, however, began to sprint away through the darkness as the first shots were fired, but the stranger was fast. He took aim and fired 5 shots at the right side of her back, each bullet striking her torso before she fell. As she lay dying in the darkness, the killer turned his attentions back to David, pointing the pistol towards his head and pulling the trigger one last time, sending a bullet crashing into his skull just behind his left ear. Apparently, the killer then simply got back into his car and drove away into the night. Sometime later, someone who drove past the spot on Lover's Lane must have seen the bodies lying in the dirt and then rushed to call the police. David was still breathing when they arrived on the scene, but was completely unresponsive, and was dead on arrival when he was finally taken to a nearby hospital for treatment. The double homicide stunned and horrified the local community, and rumors abounded that there was a crazed firearm-wielding madman on the loose, with it only being a matter of time before they struck again. One of the first people contacted by the police as a potential suspect in the murders was the young man who had confronted David as a result of his own jealousies over his and Betty Lou's blossoming relationship. But it was discovered that this young man had a strong alibi for his whereabouts, meaning there was no way he could have been the mysterious bloodthirsty stranger who pulled into Lover's Lane that night. As the summer of 1969 drew to a close, journalists and law enforcement alike wondered if the teenage lover's killer would ever be found, but little did they know that the nightmare had just began, and what would follow would continue to baffle all those involved for decades to come. Because the man who took David and Betty Lou's lives that evening, the man who relentlessly fired bullet after bullet into the Rambler station wagon, would come to be known by a name that would echo through the annals of true crime all over the world: the Zodiac. Zodiac's identity remains a complete mystery even to this day. The killer's nickname originated from a series of taunting letters and cards sent to the San Francisco Bay Area press. These letters included 4 cryptograms based around a number of ciphers, one of which was recently solved by the FBI after over 50 years of research and study. We know for certain that the Zodiac murdered 5 people in Benicia, Vallejo, Napa County, and San Francisco in the 11 months spanning December of 1968 and October of 1969. It seems he preferred to target young couples, which is how he seemed to have come across David and Betty Lou while the pair were on their first date. Yet despite only 5 confirmed victims being attributed to the Zodiac, he once claimed to have murdered 32 other people, bringing his total body count to 37 victims. A killing spree that started with 2 young lovers, so excited to finally have some time alone together on their first date, never being able to imagine that it would end in such a brutal moment of painful finality. So the next time you're on a first date, don't be so quick to go somewhere secluded, as you never know who might be watching or following, just ready to turn a perfect romantic moment into a living nightmare.